We'll be getting started here in a little bit for those of you who are tuned in, and we'll unmute once we're getting started. So just sit tight. Just a quick housekeeping for those who are online. Once it comes to question answering or asking, you'll be able to raise your hand and then you'll be given permission to speak. So that will happen later.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the meeting this evening. It's a nice thing to be able to see you folks again after everything that's happened in the past 6 to 8 months. This meeting was originally scheduled to be in, I believe, April, early April. So there's a lot's happened since the last time we got together, but it's nice to be here, and even with masks on, it's good to see everybody. This meeting is just a status update for the Complete Streets project, the phase 2. This project includes Main Street, Fort Wayne Avenue, and Northeast Street. It's the continuation of the phase 1 of the Complete Streets project that was recently constructed. And the limits on this project are basically, and it's hard to see probably, but afterward you can come up and see the display, but the limits basically are from 7th to 10th on Main Street, Fort Wayne Avenue from 7th to North E, and then Northeast Street from Fort Wayne Avenue to 10th Street. My name is Jim Lowe. I'm with Clark Dietz. We're the designers on the project. With me tonight is Ann Shaw. She's also with Clark Dietz. She's our environmental specialist. She'll be talking here a little bit, specifically about some Section 106 historical stuff. And we also have Joanne Green here, who's principal with Land Story. They're our landscape architects on this particular project. So as far as the design, this kind of a 6-month hiatus, if you will, we haven't really done a bunch to move forward because we didn't want to get ahead of ourselves as far as the steps of the project. So as far as design updates, we have just a couple. Number one, we've done some geometric layout of the project in these sections, and we wanted to see if we were able to fit parking. And on Main Street, we are able to fit parking on both sides of the road. Also on Fort Wayne Avenue and Northeast Street, the parking will be maintained. On the south side of Northeast Street and on the, I guess, the southeast side, it would be a Fort Wayne Avenue. So we were able to, once we got the survey process and got specific dimensions, we were able to make that work. So that's one thing that's happened since our last meeting. Also, we've been working with some of the utilities. There's quite a few utilities, as you folks probably know. So there's a lot of coordination that has to happen to make everything work. So we've been doing quite a bit of coordination with the utilities so far, and hopefully that will pay off when we go to construction and there's not issues with utility conflicts. And then finally, we have been working on some drainage, doing some drainage design, and that will be something that we continue to move forward with. I'll get into the schedule a little bit later, but our next step will be, they call it a preliminary field check, which is basically a technical meeting. So we have the Indiana Department of Transportation, we have representatives from Richmond, ourselves, and the utilities, and we kind of meet, well, I'm not sure if we'll meet at the city office and then go out to the site. We try to go out to the site and look at specific technical issues that we might face with this particular project. So that'll be the next step. I'll go into the schedule a little bit later. With that, I was going to turn it over to, I think, Joanne first, just to talk a bit about the landscape architecture portion of this and give any updates. I know that's
just very briefly, it's been a year since we've been involved in this project. I believe it was exactly a year ago that this last meeting occurred, and prior to that, we had an opportunity to spend some time with the Parks Department representatives, and we walked the project, the new area, and had a chance to hear about what their concerns were from a design perspective, from a long-term maintenance perspective for the site and the landscape, given that the previous project had been completed for a while. Chris Moore in my office spent 2 or 3 hours with the staff, and we came away with a much better understanding of what the city's expectations are with regard to long-term maintenance and the effects of selection of certain types of plant materials and finishes and products. So we have those very clearly listed. What we will probably do as this project moves forward here in the future, though, is to touch base with that group again, because it's been a year. And I think we're in the position of maybe learning a little bit more of how those previous projects have evolved physically to help inform us. And we want to make sure that whatever we do and whatever trees and plant materials or whatever are appropriate and based on the needs of the city and their maintenance procedures. So that's really all I have to report at this point. Just glad to be back and anxious to get going and moving forward once again. Thanks.
Thanks, Joanne. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Ann Shaw with some Section 106 updates.
So if you are a consulting party already, you know that I sent out an email a couple of weeks ago, September 24th, I believe, with the historic properties report. It has been reviewed and approved by NDOT, so that's the first step. And now it is at State Historic Preservation Office in Indianapolis, and they are currently reviewing it. We do a concurrent sort of review. So the consulting parties have 30 days, just like SHPO. If you have comments on the historic properties report, you have to let me know within 30 days. So your due date for that is October 24th. I've already gotten a couple of responses, and thank you if you are here for sending me those. I appreciate any of your responses. If you have something that is meaningful to you that you want to share with me in regards to historic resources, please do so. This is your opportunity to talk to me about that. I want to be clear that this is not a consulting party meeting per se. We will be having a specific consulting party meeting, at least one, as we move forward in the process. So my next step will be what's called an effects letter, where me in consultation with NDOT and the SHPO will decide what effects there will be to historic resources. And our options there are adverse effect or no adverse effect. We have not made that determination yet, and I do want to be clear that if we decide that there is an adverse effect to the historic districts, we will do what's called mitigation for that. That will result in what's called a Memorandum of Agreement. That involves you guys as consulting parties. It involves me, SHPO, NDOT, and the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, which is a nationwide organization. They're basically the top tier of Section 106 in America. So there will be a document created, and this is one of my favorite parts. I like to say, if we do get an adverse effect finding, that's kind of when we get creative with how we deal with those adverse effects. So that's where things like historic markers come in, like historic signs that talk about the railroad district's history. And, you know, we can do anything basically that we can get creative with to sort of make sure that the history of the Depot District, Main Street, downtown, those things are talked about so people understand what those mean to Richmond and all of you. So I put some handouts on the bar. They're mostly general Section 106 timelines and terminology in case you have any questions. Are we taking questions right now?
Let's do questions right at the end.
Okay.
We'll get through our little spiel here and then we can
Okay,
field questions.
sounds good.
Okay, thanks, Ann.
Mhm.
Okay, next I'll just touch on the schedule a little bit. I mentioned earlier that the preliminary field check, which is the technical review on-site meeting, that's going to happen this fall. In fact, I need to get with Greg after this meeting and figure out some dates that work for his schedule and for the city to move forward with setting that date. There'll be take my glasses off, sorry to read this. There'll be a public information meeting again in early spring of 2021. And then the environmental document approval right now is spring of 2021. The schedule again has been condensed quite a bit because of the 6-month COVID situation here. So there'll be another public information meeting then in the summer. That's scheduled. And then final plans in the summer also. And then the bid letting right now is scheduled for December of 2021. And the projected start of construction would be February of 2022. So that's right now, that's the schedule. That keeps us on the original schedule, but it's much tighter time frame. Next, I do want to touch a little bit on Northbound US 27 or 9th Street. That's an NDOT project that is going to be going to letting in January of 2021. The scope of that work is basically the same as the scope for the southbound project, which was recently constructed. There will be new pavement, new sidewalks, drainage will be improved, curb ramps to meet ADA. There'll be new traffic signals at L Street, South L Street, Main, and North A Street. There'll also be a new water line constructed within the contract. There will be a couple project exceptions where that 9th Street's already been constructed at South E Street, so that will not be touched. And then also at South A Street, 9th Street's already been constructed there, so those areas won't be touched. Those will be exceptions for this particular project. And I wanted to touch a little bit on the, I guess, the maintenance of traffic for this project. They will remain, the 9th Street will remain open. At least one lane will remain open at all times. So what the plan is, in general terms, is to build one half at a time. So they'll switch traffic, it'll be down to one lane. They'll build one side of the road and then switch traffic over to the newly constructed lane and build the other side. So there won't be any detours or closures of 9th Street during construction. With that, I guess we've kind of gotten through our agenda here. So I guess at this point, we'll go ahead and open it up to questions from the audience here and then also online as well.
You have a question from Susan. You can go ahead.
Okay, Susan, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. This is Susan Yeager with the Model T Museum. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes.
Okay. My questions are directed toward Ann Shaw. Hi, Ann. As you know, I sent a response already. I spend a lot of time reviewing your report. I was disappointed that there was basically no historic background for the railroad district on the historic register. There was no mention of the Fort Wayne Avenue or the depot building itself, or just the significance of our district. I know that you mentioned, referred to the report for the phase 1, where a great deal of information was provided, but would the expectation be that the SHPO would have to pull out that report and read that in order to get the background of the rich history of the depot district? So just wondering why no information, a detail of the history was included.
So there is an answer, and for the rest of you, in case you couldn't hear, Susan was saying that in the historic properties report, there is no detailed historic context, is what we call it. So a historic background, talking about the depot district or Main Street. The reason for that is that INDOT has very specific guidelines for how their reports are written. And this report, I was not recommending anything as eligible to the National Register of Historic Places. There are 3 historic districts that are already listed within our project area and 1 individual property, and all of those remain on the National Register. But because we're not recommending anything new, they do not require a historic context. And I'll let you know at this point that I actually tried to put it in and NDOT told me to take it out. So that historic context that you see in the phase 1 report is because the people who did that and wrote that report recommended properties eligible within that report for that phase of the project. Since we're not doing that, NDOT does not want to see that in the report itself for this project.
Just a follow-up to that, please. Why would the Route 27 Bridge Section 106 report, which covers the same districts, why would that have had extensive detail, which it did, which it does? Why would it be any different?
I have not read that, but it must be because within that report, they are recommending something eligible for the National Register that was not previously listed. So they have to provide a context for that within the report. Mine is a little different just because everything that should be on the National Register within our project area is already on the National Register. So contexts have been written in those National Register nominations. And I feel probably feels like they don't need to see that again since they're already on the National Register.
So the SHPO would know that the document, do they typically go back to the, to the documents from when we were granted historic status? I mean, how would they know, the history of the district?
They could go back and look at the National Register nominations if they felt like they were missing out on something. This is all, I want to say this is all this is not a choice I made. This is how NDOT has set their guidelines, and they work closely with laws and regulations. So if SHPO has questions about anything, they will ask me, or they can go back and look at the National Register nominations that are already written for the districts that are on the National Register.
There was a gentleman here on the left. You had a question?
The design of this section we're going to be doing, is it going to mirror what's already been done, or has it been redesigned?
The question was for the folks online, is the design for this section going to be the same as the design for the previous section that was done? In some respects, yes, and in some respects, no. I know that's a waffling answer there, but we are wanting to keep kind of the same theme, if you will, or the same, so it's a continuous, so there's not a huge difference between the two projects. However, this project, we're much tighter on space, so there'll be a lot less rain gardens. There'll be a lot less of the amenities. Yes, a lot less amenities on this particular project.
Will the bicycle width still be 8 foot?
Yes, yes. The question was the bicycle width will be 8 feet, and that is, yes, that is correct.
And the bump outs will be the same depth? Now?
Actually, on this particular project, the bump outs are going to be a minimum. I think that was something that the city had suggested that we try to minimize as much as possible because of the turning movements of trucks and so forth in this area. So we plan to minimize those bump outs as much as we can.
I've been puzzled by this whole thing for some time. Is this it, or are they going to extend it out to the additional areas? I don't understand why we need a loop like this.
The question is, why is there a loop? What is there future plans to expand this? That's something, I guess, can the city answer that, or is that?
Well, I know, this first thing, I know originally it was to connect certain districts of town, like the Gorge area, the downtown, the Depot area, and or to the 10th Street Park. That was the original thoughts of this project.
Okay, so Greg had mentioned that the original concept was to connect different parts of the city with this project, with this phase and the previous phase.
Are there plans to extend it further?
Okay, the question was, are there plans to extend it further? Beth, in the back?
Right. Beth Fields with the city. This is kind of an initial phase. It's an economic development tool that we have so that we can attract individuals to easily navigate. As we have a lot of individuals who want to generate additional foot traffic for our businesses and want to have that top of mind recognition as they're going by. So this is the first phase of that, with linking these two districts that are very similar to one another and can actually definitely leverage one another for the good and for the benefit. We've seen that in their partnerships on different projects and things that they've done with events. And eventually there will be the connection to the Cardinal Greenway Trail. So it will come from the Depot District to the Cardinal Greenway Trail. We have individuals that come off the trail At some point in the future, it could connect out to Clear Creek Park, to Earlham, it could connect up to, figure out where I am here. It could connect north to the hospital and the university campuses. Also then connecting further east to Glen Miller Park, Hayes Arboretum. So I think there are a lot of opportunities for additional connections so that we can ensure that the residents here and our visitors as well are able to easily navigate with whatever mode of transportation they're using, whether that's on foot, on a bike, in a vehicle.
Okay.
You're good.
I'm not going to try to repeat that, but yeah, I guess the short answer is yes, there is future. There is future things going on. Right there.
You mentioned that there will be parking on both sides of Main Street. More, less, or the same number?
We don't know that yet. The question is more or less same parking on Main Street. We do not know that yet. We haven't laid out the parking spaces. We do know that there are standard, widths of spaces, lengths of spaces. So within the area we have parking, we have to figure out how many we can get in there. So we don't know yet the numbers as far as the differences.
Yeah, but yes.
Not at this time. One of the things, because it's so tight there, the parking will be parallel. It will not be in, coming in at angled parking. So because of that, there may be some reduction in spaces, but there's still going to be spaces there. Yes.
When you start the project, is this going to be a block at a time, or like I'm on Main Street, and how's that going to affect our storefronts? Are we going to have to close our storefronts, or and as I said, is it going to be a section at a time, or all of Main Street at one time?
Good question. The question was, is the construction going to be all at once, or is it going to be segmented? The answer is it will be segmented. We have to work that out with the city and with NDOT as far as how we can do that, the most efficient way to do that, constructability wise, and also access wise. One of the things we are required to do in the NDOT specs, it requires us to maintain access to all businesses and all residences. So we have to do that. So the figuring out of how to do that is the challenge.
There are a lot of businessmen that are business people that are concerned about that. If they lose their storefront, they either don't have a back entrance or the back entrance in an alley.
Sure.
It's going to be difficult for them. So,
Sure. Again, we have to provide access so that, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Could you explain a little further what provide access means?
I guess. Do you have?
Walk up to the door, drive up to the door, or?
Yes, all of the above. If you're able to drive up now, you should be able to drive up somehow, some way during construction.
Okay.
If it's a walk up now, you should be able to walk up. So, yes.
Great,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep.
What are the chances of reducing the width of the bike trail?
We can only go 8 feet. That's the minimum standard.
Why? Who says that?
That's the federal highways.
I see bike trails in a lot of other cities that are a lot smaller than that.
Those are probably one way. Those are probably, the question is, the bike trail is 8 foot, can it be made narrower? Not for two-way.
How do they get away with that in Indy with the painted lines?
It's one way. That's why.
So you can only ride the bicycle one way.
Theoretically,
How
yes.
do you get back?
Well, if it's designed well, there should be another way, not the other direction on another street. Yes, and that's a good point, Ann. Another thing is, if it's local funding, you don't have to follow federal guidelines, so you're a little bit more free to do different things. Yes, sir.
Could you go over again when the project starts, how long the construction will, and I'm on Portland Avenue, so I'm interested in finding out how long, when do you start, how long will it be dug up, and what's, because we see what happened on Main Street during the first phase, how long, and trying to decide, Can you go through that?
Yeah. So the question is when's the project construction scheduled to begin and how long is the duration? I can tell you that right now, with the letting being in February of 2022, which is NDOT's term for the bid, that construction probably won't start until March or April of that year. And as far as the time frame, that's something that NDOT will go through and the city will have some input on this. At this point, we're going to try to condense it as much as possible into one construction season. That's been our recommendation from the start.
What is a construction season?
Basically it's weather related, okay? Basically from April to October, or we're having a beautiful October, September. So as long as the weather cooperates, we'll be able to work. So basically 6 months, roughly 6 to 8 months, depending on the weather.
And did I hear that you were going to keep the parking on both sides of Fort Wayne Avenue?
That is correct. Yep. Question was asked about Fort Wayne Avenue parking. There will be parking on both sides.
And someone also asked me to ask you about if there's going to be a study about the basement, because there was a lot of flooding in the downtown, and most of our businesses have big basements, old basements, on either 100, 150-year-old buildings. And so is someone actually going to look at that? Hopefully, not undermine our foundation.
Yes. Yes, good question. The question was basements within the project limits. One thing that we've done in the past, Greg and I have actually gone door to door. We did this on the US 27 projects, knocked on doors and said, hey, do you mind if we come in? We want to look and see where the basement's located, take some measurements. So that's what we're going to do in this case as well. And hopefully folks will let us be kind and let us in and let us go downstairs and do some measurements. And we can we'll try to work around as much as possible. And basically on 27, we avoided any basements. And we had to change our design because of it. If we have to do that here, we'll do that here. But we definitely want to stay out of basements.
I also heard one last question that you said that you reduced the size of the bump out because of the truck traffic, because there's a tremendous amount of semi-traffic going through there.
Yeah.
And from our standpoint, we did, I think today we had 4 semis in our lot. And I know you say your preliminary design, but are you taking into account the radius of these semis and 50-some foot, 53-footers now, being able to turn in and come in parking lots and drop off at the business?
The question was the bump outs, and has there been any consideration of the larger trucks that turn in and out of the lots? Actually, we do have it's a CAD program that we use that simulates the truck radius into parking lots in and out. So we put that template on our plans, and we try to make sure that what we're designing stays out of that swath, if you will, of the trucks. So that's how we would design those bump outs, so that we would avoid getting into that swath of the trucks. Thank you.
We have a question from online.
Yes.
Will Main Street and Depot construction happen at the same time?
Okay. There's a question online about Main Street and Depot construction happening at the same time. That's something that still needs to be figured out. It goes back to the segmented construction, and we have to work through the details of that. So there may be segments of both that are under construction, but they won't all be under construction at one time.
There's another question. If the bridge project starts in 23, is there any chance they will overlap?
There's a chance of overlap. The question is, the bridge project on 27, if that starts in 2023, will there be a potential construction overlap? It's too early to tell right now, but there's possibility that we might be ending our construction as they're beginning their bridge work. We're actually coordinating with the designer of that bridge project to make sure that we're not duplicating efforts. So we're working with the designer on that. So schedules tend to change within that, so we'll see what happens.
What's the proposed timeline for the construction of 9th Street?
So the question is the proposed timeline for the construction of 9th Street. As I mentioned, the NDOT bid letting is January. Again, because of the weather, they probably won't start until March. And there's a lot of utilities that need to be taken into account. So a lot of the early work is going to be utility relocation. So basically, you might not see a lot of activity the first part of next summer. Towards the end of next summer, you're probably going to see more construction activity. And then right now, the time set is for completion, substantial completion by August of 2022. So basically, again, going back to the construction season, it'll be basically 2 construction seasons.
Does this grant cover the cost of the relocation of the utilities, or do the utility companies have to carry that burden of that cost?
Good question. The question is about the utility companies and if they get reimbursed for relocating. That depends on the utility. If they're in an easement currently and they have to move, then they are reimbursable. Otherwise, they have to pay for that relocation. Greg?
With the exception of Richmond Park.
Yes.
There's money set aside.
Well, basically my question.
Yes,
Okay.
there's money already there. It's a part of the grant.
So there's money set aside for Richmond Power and Light.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
I'm curious about who wants this done. Has there ever been a referendum to citizens about do they really want this? And extensions going all over the place, 8 feet wide? I've never found anybody that likes what we have. Nobody. These bump outs are terrible. And I don't understand why we have to do this at all. Why are we doing it?
Beth, the question is why the project?
Sure, this project originally came out of the 2011 comprehensive plan. So as the community input came together for that plan, actually it was the 2006 plan, I'm sorry. And then the planning for the Stellar area began in 2011. And then also the bike and pedestrian master plan called for this as part of that process as well. And that was in 2015. And we will be updating the bicycle and pedestrian master plan in the near future. So there will be some updates to that and some additions. We've accomplished a lot of things that were in that original transportation plan, and then we're still with our new version rising. The connectivity and the trails were very high. The amenities were something that individuals were very interested in having. So that was the feedback that we received from the public during that 1.5-year process of putting the original rising comprehensive plan together. So that's where these projects come from. They come from the community through that planning process where we engage the community, and then we take those projects and give them wheels, so to speak, so that they can move forward.
There's another question. Oh, that's not a question. Just kidding.
Is there another example of a bike loop similar to this one in Richmond, elsewhere in the U.S. or the state of Indiana?
Indianapolis Cultural Trail. I think Joanne can expand on that.
Same construction?
I think it's a combination of cultural trail, but there's a whole network of bike lanes. Combination of different funding sources in Indianapolis. The previous mayor, Ballard, in Indianapolis made it a goal that there would be, I don't recall now, some enormous amount of bicycle trails built during his administration. And so, yes, they're all over downtown.
Well, if it was known to us citizens, one similar to ours, that people could see, it might be helpful.
Yep, they're all over. There's any number of
If we could
examples. Yeah,
Specifically know, that'd be
yeah,
great.
sure. Cultural trail would be a good start. They have a complete website.
And that's a two-way? Is that a two-way?
It's a combination.
Okay.
There's a two-way, with bicycle lanes on either side. There's two ways when they're next to one another. It's every possible combination you can imagine, not the cultural trail, but the rest of the bike lanes. They are all throughout Marion County now.
Okay, thanks.
We have a question from online. James says, for the historic property survey, were the historic roadways of the National Road and Fort Wayne Avenue evaluated for the National Register under NDOT's historic roadways plan? If not, why is that? And could this affect the findings? The short answer to that is no. I did not do extensive research on the National Road or Fort Wayne Avenue as a pathway, if you will, for this project. I would like to explain at this point that there's a certain amount of effort that goes into writing an historic properties report, such as the one for this project. So the answer to that is no. And I will explain that if a resource is identified through the consulting parties that is National Register eligible, then we will take a look at that for sure. That's part of the consulting party process and the whole Section 106 process. The goal of that is to incorporate public comment and make sure that voices are heard. I can't speak to the finding because we have not determined that yet. I will say that since the project area already has 3 historic districts, that it's entirely within the realm of possibility that this will already be an adverse effect. Any new National Register districts or properties that could potentially come up could change that. It couldn't. It just depends on what it is. So if there's research that you have that you want to make me aware of, I welcome that research. I would love to see that. And then in that case, I will talk with NDOT and SHPO both and make sure that we have documented everything to the proper level that we need to make sure that everything is where it should be. And I will also say that just because something has an adverse effect does not mean that it will stop the project. An adverse effect just means that we would mitigate any changes that might occur within that district or to that property.
My first question is about the utilities, the new locations of some of the utilities that need to be moved.
Yes.
Since the last project, I noticed on some of the bump outs, you actually put some of the utility poles in the bump out, and there's been such a problem with, the being able to turn, and some of the bump outs have needed to be removed. In the future, would you guys actually try to put utilities back in bump outs again, or from that first time doing the project, would you be keeping them out of the bump outs just in case they need to be removed?
Mm-hmm. Good question. The question was the utilities, location of the utilities after the project's completed. And as part of the project is the utilities get relocated. There are federal guidelines on clear zone that we have to follow. So poles and such that are obstructions need to be outside of that clear zone. So I'm not familiar with the previous project, but on this project, we're required to follow federal guidelines. So all obstructions, whether they be utility poles, whatever, have to be outside that clear zone.
The next question is, I know that we have to contribute financially to this project. So the first question is, how much exactly are we going to need to contribute for the city? Because I know that the federal contributes. And then the next question after that is, depending on the out-of-pocket for the city that we need to contribute, has anybody mentioned, instead of taking this route where we get money from other people, but taking that money and actually design the bike paths according to, so it's a win-win situation. Like, there's a lot of bike travel, you know, which a lot of us have out of town, down to Tennessee, over to Indianapolis. Some of the areas, they're painted lines, and they have those little pylon things that come up, the little plastic tubing to help protect the biker. But yet also you have the parking that you need, you have, you know, so if it's, since we have the, you know, the sidewalks right next to it, there's the places for people to walk, and then we have the, which it could be more narrow than 8 feet because we don't have to follow these guidelines. So that's just something I'm putting out there, you know.
Okay, so the question was the funding breakdown of the project, and it's a 80-20, so it's 80% federal.
The 20%'s already been allocated.
Okay.
Approved already.
Okay.
So the 20% that the city has to contribute's already been allocated, correct, Greg?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any more online?
No, not yet.
Mike, add, I know the importance of the position of our street lights. I think Jim has already met with Richmond Park and Light. As part of, make sure that these poles are put in the right place, that we don't have to do them because of the turning movements or whatever. So he's already talking with RPNL, make sure these poles get placed in the right.
Yeah, we work with Richmond Power and Light a lot, and they're really, really good to work with. We worked with them on the southbound 27th, 8th Street project, and on the 9th Street project, we worked with them also. So we have a really good working relationship with them, and they're very, very good to work with.
Is there any appeal process to federal guidelines to eliminate bump outs or to make the width shorter?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know. I could research that. But that's not
So are the bump outs, are those something that are mandatory?
no, not necessarily.
Well, you know, because that tends to be one of, you know, one of many, but one main component there, those bump outs. So is that something, you know, that might be something to.
Again, we look at the turning radius of the trucks, and if it doesn't meet, you know, we have to reduce those bump outs based on that.
But are you saying federal guidelines do not require it at all?
It depends on the situation, and it depends on the crossing location, because from a pedestrian standpoint, the shorter the crossing, the better of the street. So if we can make that, if we can get the bump outs to work with the turning radii, that makes the pedestrian crossing shorter and is a safer situation. It's a balance. There's no like concrete answer. So we have to look at each situation individually.
If we don't want them, can we not have them?
We can, we'll work with the city and NDOT, and we'll design as best we can given the situation.
You work with the city, that's the city officials. Has any effort been made to find out what the general public thinks of all this? Could they have some kind of a survey?
I think we did do a
Comment
survey.
This meeting was public, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So we have accounted about 23 people. And a good percentage of that are designers and business owners and council people. So there's you and me and maybe 5 others.
There were 2 meetings previous to this. One was specific for the business owners on the path, and then one was for the district. Then this is the time for public input. And I've gotten emails from people in the public that I pass along to the team members. We're not restricting any comments at any point. The public can submit and to participate as much as is they're willing.
Yeah.
You can't hear you.
There was a meeting for business owners, for those business people who own businesses and properties along the bike path back about a year ago. And then there was a meeting for district, anybody in the district. So anybody in basically the middle of the city could come and participate and give input. And then this is a meeting for the public. And I advertised it a month ago, and we have only a couple people from the actual just general public who aren't affiliated with the city or a business. So we've made an effort on the city side to get public input, and it's very difficult. Ask any city out there, getting public input is a difficult job. Yes.
As a council person, what about the people that come to us about it? Because, you know, we represent. So they may not be coming directly to you, but I know that I've had many come to me. So, I mean, it's, and there's, you know, there's also, there is a gap, a generational gap, because there's quite a few people who do not navigate online and get the information online and stuff, but yet, you know, phone calls, and so it may not directly come to you, but it does, you know, it almost seems like it needs to be on the ballot for everybody to actually have access to, you know, to be able to participate like that. But there are quite a few that have, you know, concerns about it.
As I mentioned before, I've talked to many, many people over several months, and nobody likes these bike paths. Nobody.
I like it.
Really?
I like it.
I run on them all the time.
I know several people that like using them.
I got nothing against bike paths in general. It's just that these things are so gigantic.
Sure, very unique.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I mean, I have to say, I've ridden on the bike paths, and it is a different feel when you ride on them. I don't have that fear of being hit by a car. That's really nice. I appreciate that. I can see, though, the concerns with the extra bump outs and all the extra amenities that really are not necessary. But it is a good feel when you're on your bike and you do like the car ride anyway. I love riding on it. And then we took that tour together, and we took a tour from here down to 10th Street Park. It was nice because we didn't have to take that right. So in that regard, I love it, you know, but I do understand a lot of the concern about these extra things that go along with it, that people who are not, you know, riding on bikes and everything, they have to still be able to use their cars and turn the corners and everything. So I see where, you know, everybody does have to work together.
We have 2 comments online, people just who aren't here who are speaking in favor of the bike paths and that they like and use them.
Of the bump outs, those are traffic calming measures, and those are safety measures. If you'll remember, I'm sure a lot of you remember when the promenade came out and the Andrews administration put in the road that we have now. The reason that it's curvy is so that it's calming the traffic, so the traffic is going slower, because this is our business district, so there should be a lot of foot traffic there, and we want to ensure that those pedestrians and those families are safe. And then also, the slower that we get cars to go through that area, the more likely they are to catch something in Rachel's window and be like, I got a park, I can go and get that. I need that mug, I need that tea. So the slower, those bump outs are slowing people down because they see them and they've got to pay attention to them. So they're really a safety measure. They're also an economic development generator because they do help slow people down because they can see what's in the stores and see what's there.
Any other questions this time? What time is it?
7:30.
Okay, so that we thought it would be about an hour, and we have the space until 8, so I'll be around a little bit longer if someone wants to come up and ask individual questions. And I appreciate everyone coming tonight and also online. Thank you for your interest. Yes, okay.
Just add, just briefly, there's going to be several more opportunities for the public to weigh in over the course of the project. I think, I don't know the difference between the public meetings and public input meetings, but I think, Jim, you mentioned, you know, 2 or 3 more.
Right, at least 2
So
more.
I believe those will be advertised, so, you know, be aware, and certainly, you know, the consultant team will, and the city will be certainly welcoming any and all input.
And I will also remind people that we will have several opportunities for consulting party meetings. If you are a consulting party, please get your comments to me if you have some by October 24th. And then every step of my process in section 106, there is a comment period. So every time I send you something as a consulting party, you typically have 30 days to respond to that. So use those opportunities if you have something that you want to say. That's what the whole process is for. So.
Thank you. Both. With that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.